in this extraordinary footage from Zimbabwean state television. The men are marched to an open grave, and local police force them to admit to the assassination of a ruling party member. A few days later, President Mugabe used the man's funeral to denounce the opposition before the nation.
Comrade Carlos' brutal murder was a bloody outcome of an orchestrated, much wider and carefully planned terrorist plot.
One of the accused opposition members, Kitani Sabanda, was arrested and imprisoned for 3 years without trial. We tracked him down in exile, and he told us his side of the story.
I was taken before cameras to make indications on a grave where there was a man buried there, a man that I never killed there. And I was made to proclaim before the nation that I was the murderer of that person.
Tortured into confessing, Kitani says his case was a classic example of what happens to those who oppose Robert Mugabe.
I was at one time raped by prisoners while prison officers washed off, and it was done by senior ranking prison officers. All this is acts of, intimidation and human degrading and just, tearing away the moral fiber within me.
Kitani fled to safety in South Africa, along with his fellow accused, Sazini Mpofu, seen here handcuffed to him on the right. But last year, Sazini made a bold move. He returned to Zimbabwe. We promised Kitani that we would try to find his friend, Sazini. And with leads from the opposition network, we finally tracked him down. He agreed to meet us at a safe location. We asked him why he risked his life to return home.
I came back because I felt I had to look after my young sisters and brothers. And I felt that if I was to stay out of the country, it would be like abandoning them.
Since Sazini was set up on this murder charge 5 years ago, the opposition has splintered. Now, Sazini says, the government remains largely unchallenged.
I think people, are no longer willing to fight because of what they've seen happening to other people and us. From Mugabe's point, actually the whole ZANU-PF group's point, I think they are telling themselves that they have won.
While Sazini was in prison, his house was burnt down by thugs loyal to the government. He's begun cautiously rebuilding it.
I might finish the place and then they come and burn it down again. So I'm still trying to see whether it's safe for everyone to come back home. Or if it's not, then we have to abandon the place.
As most of the country struggles to survive, leaders of Zimbabwe's ruling party live in splendor behind high walls. And behind the biggest wall of all lies President Mugabe's newest palace, rumored to be the largest private residence in Africa. 3 acres of floor space, 25 bedrooms, marble from Italy, and roof tiles from Shanghai. Just down the road, we see unrelenting poverty. According to the World Health Organization, Zimbabwean women have the lowest life expectancy in the world, 34 years. About a year ago, Mugabe launched a campaign that he claimed would beautify the poor urban areas. But many say his real aim was to wipe out a breeding ground for opposition. Mugabe called this campaign Operation Murambachina, or Operation Clear Out the Filth. Footage of it was smuggled out of the country.
When the police came, we are just forced to push out.
They said you must take all your belongings within 30 minutes' time.
Police burnt and bulldozed thousands of homes and market stalls in towns around the country. Up to 700,000 people were made homeless, and millions lost their livelihood overnight. A year later, traces of these people remain, but no sign of the new homes Mugabe promised he'd build them. And more than a third of Zimbabwe's population has fled the country. In the last few years, Zimbabwe's troubles have spilled into neighboring South Africa. Here in the capital, Johannesburg, we witnessed the local police trying to control this desperate scene.
Move it!
These Zimbabweans escaped President Mugabe's rule, and they don't want to go back. They will wait here all night to apply for political asylum. An exiled Zimbabwean journalist took cover behind our car.
There's pandemonium here, pushing and shoving because people are looking for asylum papers. But there's no system or there's no mechanism in place. They are rubber bullets, but they're shooting. I mean, the sound is actually gunshots.
For these Zimbabweans, a place in line represents survival. They know only a handful will ever be allowed to stay. In the last 5 years, over 2 million Zimbabweans have fled their homes for South Africa. Here, they've become a shadow population, eking out an existence in some of the poorest parts of the cities. The exiles look to the South African government to denounce President Mugabe and help bring about the end of his regime. But newspaper publisher Trevor Ngube tells me this isn't likely.
And the South Africans don't know what to do with Robert Mugabe. The Americans don't have a clue how to deal with this man, apart from going in there and bombing him, which is not an option. They would want regime change yesterday, but how do you do it? How do you deal with a fallen hero like Robert Mugabe? A man that the whole of the continent has looked up to, a man that assisted the liberation of South Africa, for instance. How do you tell your father to shut up and sit down? Robert Mugabe, he's not getting out of power. He's made up his mind that he's going to drop dead in office.
As long as Mugabe stays, his people will continue to flee. At crowded deportation centers in South Africa, the unlucky ones are rounded up by the police and herded back to a country on its knees. In our time in Zimbabwe, we were lucky enough to have met those still willing to speak out. But their voices are growing harder to hear.
This is torture. This is torture.